Uber has been an extremely popular stock ever since its IPO back in 2019, and it has seen some extreme volatility, especially in recent months as demand for their core rides business fell off a cliff due to the global issue. So what does this mean for Uber shareholders? Is it time to potentially sell out of this stock and cash in any profits you may have? Or is it time to possibly double down on this opportunity and increase our position size here for potential massive gains in the future? I'm going to share with you guys my personal take here on Uber, what I see with the business moving forward, what things may have fundamentally changed with this business, and then I'll be sharing with you guys towards the end of the video on my personal stance with my position here with Uber. Remember guys, as always, if you enjoyed this content or you find any value in my content, all you have to do is hit that like button down below and hit the subscribe button as well if you're brand new here to join this community. I appreciate each and every one of you for your support, and without further ado guys, let's get into this one. Okay guys, so I want to start off this video with the biggest elephant in the room, and that is the collapse that Uber saw with their rides business because of the global issue. So the company just reported their earnings recently, and it was a mixed quarter for them as expected. They missed on EPS, however they did beat on revenue. The real meaningful information, however, is that the revenue jumped over 14% year over year, which shows us very strong growth. However, due to the global issue, revenue from the rides business was down 5% year over year, so this hinted a slowdown in rides for the company for the coming months. And sure enough, the Uber CEO did come out and say in April that they saw a 80% drop year over year in the rides business, which is quite significant. But really, if you think about it guys, it makes total sense. Most of the world was in complete lockdown here in April, so no one really had a need to take a ride anywhere. But the good news is that Uber believes that the bottom is in, and so far the following 4 weeks since the bottom has seen week over week increases in demand once again. Some markets are recovering slower than others. However, they are seeing business back to around 70% of levels before the global issue hit in places like Hong Kong, for example. And as more people get back to work and there's a sense of normalcy resumed, this should slowly to increase in other markets as well. Now, many people believe that Uber has fundamentally changed here as a business, but I tend to disagree with this point. Now, there will be some scars and some permanent changes in the world for sure, with certain aspects and certain behaviors that we have. However, I do believe that the trend of using an Uber is still going to remain intact and get even stronger in the future. So let's think about, from a consumer's perspective, real reasons why you would use Uber. The first reason I could think of is that you typically use it to meet up with friends at, say, a party or a restaurant or an event. And eventually, once we resume some sense of normalcy, I see this kind of usage resuming as well. The second reason is maybe to and from the airport. This is actually a big one for Uber, as many people when they travel don't want to go park their car at the airport parking lot and pay for parking fees. So what they do is they just Uber it, not only in their home city to get to and from the airport, but most likely when they arrive at their destination as well. This typically means that a consumer would have 4 separate Uber rides to and from their destination, not to mention that the trips that they'll be taking during the vacation as well. Right now, of course, people aren't traveling, so this isn't happening a whole lot. But the question, of course, is do we believe that travel will reach peak levels of 2019 again? Absolutely, in my opinion. And as the middle class continues growing globally, this will continue to grow as well. Now, the third reason people use Uber a lot is for work. They use it to travel to and from their workplace. Now, this segment could be fundamentally hurt over the long term because many businesses are shifting to a work from home model. But does this mean that all companies are suddenly not going to have offices and everyone's going to be work from home permanently? Absolutely not, at least not in my opinion here. So while I do see a decline in this segment of rides, I do think that this will still be a relatively strong segment for them once people resume their normal lives again and start going into the office more frequently as well. Also, I think this segment has potential to grow due to the side effects of the global issue. People are afraid to use public transit right now, like the subway or public buses, so I think that they will rely on Uber much more to go to and from work or go do their groceries or whatever it may be that they used public transit for before. And this may actually result in new riders using the platform who previously never used the service for these intentions. And who knows, maybe Uber is working on some sort of subscription service here for people who commonly use Uber rides to and from a specific destination often. Maybe it's, to and from your workplace 5 days a week. Uber could offer you some sort of deal where you pay for a month of subscription there and you can have X number of rides for that month, similar to what you have with like the train service typically, where you have a pass or maybe a bus pass. I think this could be a pretty big game changer because it would kind of guarantee some revenue for the company every single month. And it could also be good for consumers because they would typically save on sort of a subscription service if they plan to use that service pretty much every single day. But anyways, whatever way you cut it, guys, I think that we're going to see a very strong recovery, a very strong bounce back here in the rides portion of Uber's business. I think that a lot of people are overlooking how useful this service is for consumers and how much consumers really rely on Uber's rides here for just regular day-to-day tasks. Now, while the ride segment may have had a tough quarter here with gross bookings, the Eats segments for Uber was a booming business here and saw a 52% growth year over year, and this is without April included. In April, things just got better for the Eats business as consumers could enjoy some new partners that Uber signed up with. These include Chipotle, Dunkin', and Shake Shack. And on top of this, Uber also signed some grocery players for delivery as well, which I'm sure was heavily used during the lockdown period. Overall, really, Eats is a booming business right now for Uber, and I believe these shifts in consumer spending and consumer habits using food delivery is here to stay. Maybe it won't be used as often as it was during the lockdown, but I believe people will be ordering delivery a lot more often than they did before the lockdown. It's convenient, it's quick, it gets delivered to your door, and more often than not, you typically get a better experience at home and usually a cheaper experience at home as well, because you can kind of provide your own snacks, you can kind of provide your own desserts, your own drinks, and you just have the core meal delivered to you from Uber. I think that this is a fundamental shift in consumer behavior here. I think consumers are going to be doing this a lot more moving forward, even once we resume normalcy, which is why I'm not so bullish on the restaurant space, like typical traditional sit-down restaurants. I am still bullish on fast food restaurants because people still crave those foods, and Uber actually partners with those companies as well, like McDonald's. So I'm not really concerned there, but I think the traditional dining in experience is going to change permanently here moving forward. Now, this doesn't mean that people aren't ever going to go out for dining experiences. That's definitely not going to happen. But I do believe there's going to be a significantly more amount of people that just say, you know what, on a Friday night, I'm just going to order food in, just watch a movie at home, as opposed to, go out to some fancy restaurant, dress up, pay a ton of money for food, and then pay more money to go watch a movie at a theater. It just doesn't make sense to me, at least. And once in a while, maybe okay, but not as often as before. And Uber has actually made it very clear here that they expect this growth to continue, with a statement from their annual report saying that they expect to experience seasonal increases in their revenue in the first and fourth quarters compared to the second and third quarters, although the historical growth of Eats has masked these seasonal fluctuations. So it's clear to me that even though Q2 is typically a weaker quarter traditionally for the company, this growth will continue here with Eats, and we'll probably see some record numbers posted here for the quarter. Now, on top of its core Eats business, there also has been some speculation in recent weeks that Uber is looking to potentially buy out one of its biggest competitors, Grubhub. I made a dedicated video on this, so check that out for more detailed information. But if this deal does happen, it would place Uber as the #1 player in many markets around the US where it doesn't have majority market share. This would create some serious competition for DoorDash, which could ultimately result in better prices for consumers. Now, if you were to ask me, I would say this deal with Grubhub has about a 70% chance or so of passing, and that's because I think it's beneficial for both companies here to work together to come to some sort of agreement. It's clear that the space is highly competitive. It's clear that the space uses a lot of capital to compete. And I think with Uber's kind of reach and brand name and Grubhub's kind of market share that they've already created, these two companies could kind of benefit each other here and grow to be the #1 player in this space, putting DoorDash in a tough position to compete. Now, if I look at this from Uber's perspective, yeah, this makes a whole lot of sense because this will pretty much propel them to the number 2 or the number 1 spot, depending on the market in the US here. But when I look at it from Grubhub's perspective, it also does make sense because Grubhub is spending a ton of cash to compete with DoorDash and Uber. And if they just combine with Uber here, it would save both companies a ton of cash and they could work collectively to become the number 1 player globally for food delivery. I think the benefits for both companies make sense, and I think a deal here is very likely. So again, with concerns about the Eats business, I'm extremely bullish here as an investor. This was previously a segment that I saw as possibly a drag down for the Uber company as a whole, but now because of the global issue, is kind of a silver lining here where the Eats business has just propelled itself to be one of the best growth drivers for the company and potentially one of the biggest profit makers for the company moving forward. Now, in my opinion, I think that Uber's name has really engraved itself into society. Some of you may disagree with me here. Some of you may think that this is not really a point to consider for an investment, but to me, it makes a lot of sense here. When you think of doing a web search, what do? You Google it. When you think of editing an image, what do? You Photoshop it. When your nose is running and you need to grab a tissue, what do you ask for? A Kleenex. And when you think of getting a ride to go somewhere, what do? You Uber it. Now, this is purely my opinion here, and this is maybe a bit biased from my side, but I think that Uber has really engraved itself in society as a term that people use for rides in general. You commonly hear people say, oh, I'll just Uber it and meet you there. But funny enough, sometimes they may actually end up taking a Lyft, they may end up taking a taxi, or they may end up taking some other public service. But the term Uber is pretty much understood between everyone as I'm going to take a ride to get from point A to point B. This tells me that Uber is now a brand that lives in society, that people use on a regular basis, everyone understands. And I think as this grows more and more on a global scale, Uber is just going to pretty much dominate the competition here and be the service that people use for rides globally. Now, of course, things could go either way with this. Maybe Uber doesn't actually succeed, and just because its name is engraved in society doesn't mean that this company is going to be around in, say, 10 years or so. But in my opinion, based on my views, my analysis, my understanding of this business, I think it's going to be around for a very long time. I think that's going to be much bigger than it is in 10 years than it is today. And I think that Uber is actually going to become like a Google or a Kleenex or a Photoshop as opposed to something like a Kodak. Now, I didn't even touch upon other segments of their business like Uber Freight or future autonomous driving and other cool projects that they're working on, which could very well be huge segments of their business in the future. For now, I think the core of the company with rides and eats is what's going to keep driving this business to new levels. And I, as an investor and a consumer of Uber, am completely bullish on the future of these two segments. Now, I do want to briefly touch upon the stock here. I believe even today at a market cap of $60 billion, this company is cheap. I see Uber as a multi-$100 billion company in the future as it continues to dominate markets all over the world. So to see it at a $60 billion market cap is quite undervalued from that perspective. That being said, I've already built a good position in the stock that I'm happy with in the low 30s. And at this time, I would like to buy more, but it would have to enter this buy zone I have outlined here in the high 20s or lower. The last time I bought this stock was on March 10th around those prices, and I would be happy to add to this position again in the future around these levels. I wouldn't mind making Uber a large position in my portfolio as I like their business model and I like their future outlook, and I'll personally be monitoring this one closely for a potential dip again in the future. Remember, even after a year of going public, Facebook stock was struggling, but once it got rolling, there was no turning back. The same thing happened with Tesla. For 3 years after going public, stock didn't really do a whole lot until investors finally got it and started pouring money into it. To be honest, I think the same thing will happen here with Uber over time. It's still down over 16% off its highs after going public just about a year ago. And I think investors still haven't got it here with Uber. But sooner or later, I can see this stock at a $100 billion plus market cap with a ton of future growth ahead. So guys, do you agree with my thesis here on Uber? Do you think that I'm being unreasonable here with my bullish outlook on Uber stock? Now, it's funny because I typically go for companies that are highly profitable, generating massive amounts of free cash flow, and have very strong balance sheets. But Uber is an exception here. Although I believe their balance sheet is good, their fundamentals aren't that strong right now. They're not profitable. They could potentially be trading at a higher valuation at today's levels. But the conviction that I have in the company is what convinced me to really build up a position here in the stock. I think the company has done an excellent job really engraving itself in society with both their rides business and their eats business. And I think over time, these two segments will just continue ballooning and growing on a global scale, which presents a massive opportunity, in my opinion, for investors. Guys, as always, let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree with me here on my Uber investment. Let me know what you plan to do with your investment, whether you plan to buy more shares, maybe hold on to them for the next 5-10 years or so, or maybe you're happy with your profits right now and you sell out of your position and move on to another stock. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, guys, but either way, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to invest positively, and I'll see you in the next one.